First team to 10 points wins on Saturday. What you think, folks? Rutgers, Iowa. Boy, there's going to be a lot of defense in this one. We know Iowa, that's what they do. Rutgers has been that team in the last couple of years under Greg Schiano as well. Really good defensive play. They get together in Iowa City coming up this Saturday. We got Christian Dyer on the line from Rutgers Wire on the USA Today Network. So get on over there, check out Christian's work covering Rutgers. Christian, how you doing today?
Doing well, you're right. But I think you're maybe a little optimistic. I'm not sure if anyone's going to get 10 points in this game, Mark. But I love the optimism. I love the optimism.
Well, shoot, Iowa's coming off 10-7. And so with no score at halftime. So we shall see. Rutgers, I got to say, this game against Ohio State obviously was a pretty impressive effort that was much closer than the final score would indicate. Running game, Kyle Monangai was certainly in a groove, gained about 150 yards in that game, and really pushed around an Ohio State defense that had not been pushed around like that all season.
Yeah, I think it was a good performance. Up 9-7 at halftime. So Rutgers did almost as well as Iowa did in the entirety of their game in the first half against the number one team in the country, right? Ohio State. And down 21-16 early in the fourth quarter. And then Rutgers going for it on fourth down. Kind of in their own end, forced to Ohio State then taking the ball down and getting a touchdown and kind of pulling away very quickly there. It was a good performance. It was a solid performance, I think, all things considered from Rutgers. Like you said, Mark, closer than that final 35-16 score line would indicate. At the end of the day, it showed that Rutgers can compete with a lot of the teams in the country, but they're not quite ready to knock off a top 10 team. It's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back against Iowa, a team that stylistically and I think very much in form and manner is very similar to what Rutgers is trying to be, might just be a little bit better than Rutgers is right now.
Yeah, I would think that they are. However, I got to say, I looked at this Vegas line of about 1 or 2 points differential on the road, which would indicate that they actually favor, in a very small way, Rutgers as a better neutral site team. Going to Iowa is just a 1 or 2 point underdog in this one. So Vegas likes what they have seen in recent weeks.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reason for optimism coming into this game. Rutgers had beaten Michigan State in thrilling fashion, big fourth quarter comeback, and then kind of, stomped and rolled Indiana tighter in the first half, but really got things going a couple weeks ago at Indiana. And then I think last week they opened up a lot of eyes. Ohio State certainly did not come in firing on all cylinders. A couple self-inflicted wounds were the difference in this game, but there was a real sense late in the third quarter, early in the fourth quarter, that if one or two things broke Rutgers' way, Ohio State might be facing a challenge deep into the fourth quarter. Not quite sure how that's going to be in a tough environment that is Iowa. And again, I think stylistically, this is a team that's just a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger than what Rutgers wants to be. Rutgers is predicated on the ground and pound. They want to defensively get after you, get after the quarterback. And Iowa's well suited for this type of a matchup. So we'll see if Rutgers can step up, if they're versatile, if they have a couple different ways to get after the quarterback and to stop the run, then they can make this a game. But this is a tough environment to play in. And Iowa does everything Rutgers wants to be a little bit better.
Yeah, so while I was impressed with the entire effort, Rutgers offense and defense, what was impressive from a psychological standpoint is they know that they're facing the number one team in the country. They know that they're facing a team that has beaten them by an average of 42 points per game over their entirety in the Big Ten. And once that play went Ohio State's way, the little pop pass over the middle, when Rutgers, it could be argued, should have stayed with a running approach at that point, but the collision down near the goal line, Jordan Hancock brings it back for a pick six, 93 yards, and you go from potential up 2 scores to trailing. But this team got off the deck after they're hit with another touchdown, and it's 21-9, and it looked like Ohio State was going to pull away much earlier than they eventually did, and Rutgers comes back with a nice drive to make it a 21-16 game, and that's where they really showed me that they could bounce back, be resilient after taking a bit of a body blow against the team that's supposed to blow them out.
Yeah, I think it was impressive. I think it showed, Greg Schiano here is in his fourth year here back at Rutgers. Greg Schiano 2.0, right? And he's been talking about this being a developmental team and being able to reload every year and kind of progress and build things up. And it was interesting, Mark, that on Monday, Schiano had mentioned Iowa. And he said, there are opponent coming up, but if I hadn't left for the NFL after that 2011 season, we would be, I think, where Iowa is. And Iowa's very similar. Iowa doesn't get all the four-star guys. Iowa doesn't get a ton of the blue chip, the ready-made prospects. But what Iowa gets and does is develops players, and they get players who buy in consistently. You look at the players that Iowa loses in the transfer portal every year. It's more about attrition, guys who maybe can't necessarily find their way on the field. It's not the high-end players that are looking for a payday. The kind of players that go to Iowa are very similar to the kind that go to Rutgers. They're there to develop, and they're there to take the next step. And I thought it was an interesting comparison from Greg Schiano, and I do think that could be somewhat the ceiling for Rutgers. But what we saw on Saturday was the developmental program going up against the blue chips, and the developmental program with a lot of seniors on this roster played well. They were not intimidated, and they had Ohio State against the ropes for a long time. I think that's what's impressive.
Well, certainly if Rutgers and Greg Schiano are able to match Iowa's record under Kirk Ferentz for 20 plus years, and specifically in the last 5, that would not be a bad deal. That would be pretty impressive in and of itself.
It is, but keep in mind that Iowa's in that West Division, which is
sure.
a lot more manageable than going up against the Ohio State,
Yes.
Michigan. And I know next year it gets a little bit more difficult with the 4 teams that are going to be coming in. But it is difficult when you're going up against Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State for 3/8 or 3/9 of your Big Ten schedule, 1/3 of it. It does make it a challenge.
Absolutely. There's no comparison between the two divisions at the top. Certainly. Gavin Wimsatt, I don't know if this is a common trend with him. I've seen Rutgers play a handful of times this year, but was a little bit more focused on this game in particular. Everything out to the sideline seemed like he had no idea where the ball was going. Once they started running slants and seam routes and everything was right in front of him in the middle of the field is when he started to make hay in the passing game. That was my observation, at least.
Accuracy issues do plague Wimsatt. He just turned 20 years old, which is still young to be a Power 5 quarterback, and I think to be the starting quarterback of a rebuilding team, it is a lot. And he's best when he gets out of the pocket, when they can kind of move him, get him out into space, and maybe he doesn't have too much time back there. With the accuracy issues, he can just kind of pop, like you said, and sling it. That is when he's been at his best. But that deep ball, those touches, really had a lot of difficulty being able to find those downfield targets. And like you said, the slants, the quick outs, the timing, the placement, those things have all struggled. He's got a very strong arm. Now using it, controlling it, putting it within the right context in terms of the passing game. Those are all the things that he struggled with. He has improved. He's hovering around 50% completion percentage, which I know isn't a great number, but it's an uptick from last year by about 5 or 6 percentage points. If he makes similar gains as a junior and a senior, you'd like to think that Rutgers can continue this momentum. So there has been improvement. And in coming in from last year, and I don't want to go too much into the history. I know we talked about this last week, Mark, but the offensive coordinator that was in place the first year and a half, 2 years of Gavin Wimsatt's development, really there was a big emphasis on trick plays and kind of exotic plays. And in some ways that set Wimsatt's development back. Now in his 3rd year here, this seems like a bit more traditional offense tailored towards his skill set. They're relying on his legs a bit more. He's over 400 yards rushing on the season, which is the most in a single season in Rutgers football history. So he's doing well in that regard. Now it's going to be the refinement of the passing game. And he showed a few times this year that he can do that. He showed it last year at Michigan State, but not consistently.
Iowa's not been moving the ball against anyone in this conference. You're probably well aware they're dead last in the nation in total offense, have been for a number of weeks. and have been averaging like 230 or 240 yards per game. And even that standard of last at 230 yards per game has been something that they've not been able to reach in recent weeks. They're coming off 169 yards and 127 the week before against Minnesota. So this is an offense that Rutgers could, if they play their best game, could just completely dominate.
Yeah, if Rutgers doesn't turn the ball over, which was the key to kind of their start to the season, first 3 games they didn't have a turnover, beat 2 Power 5 teams, one from the Big Ten in the process, Mark. If Rutgers can get back to that, and they only had 1 turnover last game, but it was a deadly one. It was a pick six. If Rutgers can get back to that, not turn over the ball, and just kind of consistently be able to run the ball, get Kyle Monangai into the open field, maybe a trick play or two here or there to kind of open things up, Rutgers has a puncher's chance on the road against Iowa. My concern is what I stated earlier. Iowa is a bigger, stronger version of what Rutgers wants to be, and certainly not what Rutgers is right now. Rutgers is nowhere near the size in the trenches that Iowa is. If Rutgers can go out there and consistently get after the quarterback, hurry some things, get some turnovers of their own, then they have a chance in this game. But this is not going to be a great advertisement for Big Ten football, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, you wouldn't call this more in the range of a 60-40 chance as opposed to a puncher's chance?
You know, that 40% number I think is very intriguing. I've seen that with the ESPN FBI and a
I just
couple
made
other
that
things
up.
that are out there. No, but I mean, it's right on. I think ESPN FBI might have them at 38%. Don't quote me on that. I think that's probably pretty accurate about that 40% chance. No turnovers. I think you move that up to 50-50. If Rutgers is able to force a turnover or two against Iowa and keep things clean on their end, then I would like their chance to win, because this Iowa offense, I mean, listen, Jim Thorpe would probably be an upgrade for what they're running right now, right? I mean, they need to go back to the era of developing a forward pass at this point.
Rutgers, for as well as they're playing on defense, is not, in my estimation, quite the Iowa defense. And for as limited as Rutgers is on offense, they are a 2 or 3.0 version of Iowa. They're much better moving the football. So special teams, I think, to a certain extent, gets undervalued on the Iowa side from a national perspective, but they are airtight. One of the best field goal kickers in the game, the best punter in the nation, coverage units, return units, exceptional. Is Rutgers able to, have they shown the ability to be at that level potentially, or at least stay in the ballpark from a special team standpoint?
Yeah, special teams has been a little ordinary this year for Rutgers, which was kind of the hallmark last year for Rutgers that kept them in a bunch of games. The Iowa game last year, the Nebraska game, both home games. What was special teams performances? They had a block punt against Michigan. That kind of kept them in that first half. As a matter of fact, I think Rutgers had a lead against Michigan in the first half last year. So we haven't necessarily seen that. The return game, both kickoff and punt return, Mark, has been negligible for Rutgers. The kicker for Rutgers is a redshirt freshman, Jay Patel, has done a good job. He was Big Ten Kicker of the Week honors a couple, earlier in the season, a couple weeks into the season. He's got a good, decent leg. Missed a couple here or there, a couple chip shots, but overall has been solid. But clearly, you look at what Iowa's able to do, how they're able to dial up the pressure, in particular on that pump block. It's impressive. That may well be the tipping point in this game.
There you go. Christian Dyer doing excellent work there. Rutgers Wire, please join him right there. Rutgers taking on Iowa coming up in a key game for the Hawkeyes in regards to their Western Division shot, and for Rutgers just trying to improve their bowl eligibility and make sure that they don't finish out at 6-6 here. Please like the video if you enjoy the content here at the Voice of College Football. And again, join Christian on Rutgers Wire. Christian, we appreciate you stopping by and breaking things down for us.
Appreciate you, Mark. Take care.